There we go. So I guess what I want to start out with is, how is everybody doing on their speech analysis essays?
I
Pretty
might need to change mine.
Are people feeling like you know what you were supposed to be doing? You have a pretty good handle on things, I hope?
Yeah.
Oh, we got another person.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the other things I just want to put it out there is, if you are in the midst of writing or you're doing something or anything like that and you realize like, hey, I really need help, just tell me. You know what I mean? And we can work it out. Sometimes people have just like a quick question and I can answer it. Other times it's a little more in depth, and I can set up. I've done it for like 4 or 5 kids now. Not necessarily in this class, but 4 or 5 kids overall, where we've just gotten on Zoom and figured it out. So that's something I just want you to know that, you know, we certainly can do. So that's an option. So if you're ever like really lost, please just, you know, reach out to me the same way you'd ask me a question in class. And that will make everything much, much easier. All right, so I'm going to try to get who all we have here. So I'm seeing that we have Sarah and we have Haley. Haley, are you with anybody today?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Evan, Lyric, Madeline, Kirk, because I will give you guys some extra credit for being on here. Hannah, Morgan, and Peyton. And so anyhow, so if you are feeling pretty okay with your analysis that you're doing, your speech analysis, then I think we're going to move on and kind of talk about the basics of art analysis. Because has anybody here done an art analysis?
No.
Okay, I think you're going to find this a little bit easier than what you think. Those of you who have taken art classes, you're going to be in a little bit better shape because you've probably done this. You know what I mean? When you're trying to create something that, you know, will make doing this a little bit easier, but I don't think it's hard for anybody. So I just kind of want to put that out there. I always have people at the beginning of this, you know, kind of freaking out for a moment. I'm going to start sharing this here. And of course, it's at the very end. Oh, we've got Corey added. Put him on. So I always have people at the beginning of this feeling like just a little bit overwhelmed. You know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, there's no way I can write 4 pages, because that's what it'll be. There's no way I can write 4 pages on a painting or on one piece of artwork, which is, of course, what we will be doing. So I guess one of the first questions that I want to ask you is, what is an analysis? So we just did a speech analysis. So what is it if we're saying we're doing a visual analysis? So let's start with analysis. What is just analysis? What does that mean?
Looking at something and just kind of reviewing everything that you could pinpoint. Like, for example, in an art analysis, you could do the style, the colors, like the meaning, things like that.
Okay, so what did we do in a speech analysis? You're on the right track, Haley, for sure. What did we do in a speech analysis?
I kind of looked at the posture, their tone of voice, and like the expressions they gave off. There's also the things they talked about and how they explained it, just stuff like that.
What was the thesis?
Are you asking for
Yeah, I'm
me
asking
specifically?
not specifically you, but like, what do we do in a thesis statement? What did our thesis statement have in common? Everyone across the board was supposed to have one thesis thing in common. What
If
was
the
that?
successful or not?
Like
Was
whether
it
they met their goal or not.
okay? Was it successful in reaching its goal? And that is what analysis is. And then we break down how they did that. So you're right, Haley, when you said that we were looking at, you were looking at the posture that they had and the examples that they used and all of those things, because those are all the tactics that they use in a speech analysis or in a speech to make their point obvious. So we're doing the exact same thing when we're doing a visual analysis. We're looking at some pieces of artwork and we're saying, well, what was the goal? What was the point that that this artist was trying to make? And sometimes, I mean, like in painting, you're so in the realm of emotions and feelings and things. So sometimes they just want to make you feel something or to have you have a deeper understanding of a moment. And sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes they're really getting us very specific point across. And it's always working with symbols, right? Artists are always working with symbols. So we are going to be looking at symbols and how those things are. And so we have to kind of have a deep understanding of a lot of different things in order to make this happen, in order to make it so we can do this effectively. And that's how this, when you really start breaking all of that down into its parts and pieces, you know, when you actually start doing that, that's when you're going to find the answer to like how to do this visual argument. And you're going to talk about the way they did it in the same way that you talked about their posture, where they get loud and soft. You're going to be talking about things like the focus of the painting, and you're going to be talking about the colors that they used and what stuck out. And you're going to have to research your painter probably and the time period a little bit, because you're going to need to know things like, so if you know Van Gogh, right, and you've looked at this, I think most of you have probably seen this painting, Starry Night, before. Am I right? This is one that you don't have to know art in order to know, right? You know, this is Van Gogh. He was, at this time, he was sitting actually in a mental asylum at the time, and he was looking out his window. And, you know, he was a very religious guy too, but he had lots of mental problems. But he sees out here, the big focus is on the sky. So we have to say, well, why do we have the big focus on the sky and on these yellow stars and stuff like that? And you have to really think about that. And where does that show up? And then you have to look up, well, what does yellow mean to Van Gogh? You know, because that's important. And what do the blues mean? Because that's the whole painting. And obviously, even though he's looking out over a town, because there's a town down here, it's kind of cut off in this picture, but even though there's a town down there, the focus is not the town. There's some little lights on, and it's kind of interesting if you learn more about the painting, what those little lights mean. But that's something for you to think about, you know, like, why is this bench empty? Why do we have the focus of this bench down here? Being an empty bench, and why do we have all these beautiful colors up here? I see this bright light here right behind this bench, so that's what makes me know there's a focus there. I'm looking at that. So those are all things for you to be thinking about. We could go through all of these, but I probably won't. But I want you to think about, what is the artist doing, and then you have to figure out what are the right questions to ask. So here's my information, I guess, on how to approach a piece of artwork. And it doesn't matter if it's a painting or a sculpture. We're going to go through some stuff about sculpture, and we're going to go through some stuff about other ones as well as we go through this. But I want you to also be knowing that there's certain things that you approach any piece of art with. And I'm starting out with painting because I think it has is probably the simplest of them to analyze. You know, it's static. You don't have 20 different views of it. You have, you know, so this here, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this is the Sistine Chapel. And we can see what it looked like in order to paint this thing. Can you imagine? Like, really? Like, being on this scaffolding, painting the ceiling of this thing and having it come out like this. Absolutely amazing work. So you have to think about some basics. The first one is, who is the artist? Who actually, you know, this was Michelangelo who did this one. Who is the artist? What time period are they in? If there's a title or a place that the painting is in, what is the title of the painting? Because sometimes the title gives away the whole piece. You know, you really have to know that title. Other times it's something like Still Life number 5, you know, and so it might not have a lot of meaning. So you kind of have to look at those and see, kind of unpack that title to see whether or not it actually has meaning to the piece or not. When and where was it painted? And does that have meaning? You know, this is a chapel. So obviously this is going through various books of the Bible and all sorts of stuff like that that's on here in the Sistine Chapel, but it's inside of a religious area. So obviously it's going to have some meaning of where it was painted. Other things that are important to know with that when and where is to understand the culture that was involved. So, you know, if you choose something that's like a Japanese piece of art or something like that, you have to learn something about Japanese culture. Otherwise, you're not going to really understand what it is that they were painting. Because in the same way that, you know, when you look at a piece of literature or something like that, it's really important to know, in the same way that it's important to know the time and place and things like that, and the cultural beliefs. It's the same with a piece of artwork. You know, you have a person who is part of a culture and is probably reacting to that in some way, or is being commissioned to do something. And that's something else to know. Is this something that was a commissioned piece? The Sistine Chapel absolutely was. Do I think he had some ideas and images in his head? Absolutely. You know, so those are different things for you to be thinking about. What style was it painted in and why? Especially as you move further and further throughout art history, you're going to see that there's many different styles out there, and they have sort of each one of those styles usually has kind of a philosophy that goes with it. You know, so if you're looking at artwork from medieval Europe, almost all of that artwork was commissioned by the church. And what's interesting is if you get into, you know, that around 1,000 or, you know, 800 or so, if you're looking at most of that medieval stuff, it all looks like cartoons. And it was because the people of that time period believed that you were forming an idol if it looked real. It wasn't that they didn't know how to paint something real. It's that they chose not to because they were afraid of people worshiping graven images and worshiping the artwork in the church instead of, you know, the meaning of whatever it was they were talking about. You look at times like if you look at the Greeks and the Romans, they did things that were, you know, they showed, and also in Renaissance pieces, you know, in all three of those, you're going to see a lot of like naked bodies, and you're going to see those naked bodies done in very explicit detail. And much of that was because they believed that the splendor of what God had created, or what the gods had created, if you're in, you know, was these bodies, that our bodies were something to be worshiped, to be thought about, to be celebrated. You know, so bodies were important, especially people who were in great shape. So that was something that, you know, you had to look at. Also, what inspired the painting? Oh, other styles. If you look later on, you're going to see something like Cubism or something like that. Cubism is like Picasso. And when we get into Picasso's time frame, you're talking about the lost generation. You're talking about the people who lived through, the Industrial Revolution. That was when they were little kids and all of the abuses of people. They lived through the First World War. They survived the 20s, the Great Depression, and World War II. And pretty much that was their life, right? And so the world was very surreal at that time. And we see surrealism come in and Cubism, and it's where all these things, everything you believe to be sort of true, is all broken apart. And so they really believed those things. And so that's why it was. If you look at Impressionism is where they were no longer trying to focus on what things looked like it was a picture, but they wanted to focus on what was important to a person. And so you see a lot of things kind of looking unrealistic, but maybe one thing is in fairly decent focus and seems somewhat realistic. So it was all based on whether you're trying to get sort of an actual reality, or are you trying to get a mental reality or an emotional reality. And all of those are being sort of shown in these different styles that people have painted in. So something just to kind of keep in mind that, Picasso didn't paint the way he did because he wasn't capable of painting another way. It was because he was choosing to make those decisions. And that, of course, brings into mind what inspired the painting. Picasso's probably most famous painting is called Guernica. And if I showed you a picture of it, which I probably will later on in this, but if I showed you a picture of it, you would recognize this painting. It is giant. First of all, it's larger than probably the whole wall of my classroom. It is, and it's super tall. And it's the one. It's got horses and people dying and all sorts of things all over the place. Right? It was inspired by a battle scene that happened in Guernica, Spain. So that's why it's named what it is. So you have to think about what inspired it, if there's an event or if there's a change in what's happening in the world. All of those things are different inspirations that people have. And that's where you need to find, then once you find out what it is, you have to find out the history, background info. Some painters, like I said, some of them have particular colors that have significance, and they have that same significance in painting after painting after painting. You have to know that. Otherwise, you're not going to really interpret their work appropriately. So this particular one, using what I just said, I think you could easily write a painting on this, or write an essay on this particular painting. I'm going to tell you you're not allowed to, just because of the fact that we're going to break it down in class here. But what are some things that you notice? So we want to look for some things like what we just said, and think also about things like, what are the elements in the painting? What are the focuses? Where does your eye go to? Somebody help me out here.
Seems to.
I'm sorry, I can hardly hear you. What did you say? Madeline? Anybody else? What are some things you notice? What do you think the focus, when you look at this painting, if you just close your eyes for a second, and then you open your eyes, when you look at this painting, where does your eye go first?
Probably to the girl.
Okay, to this guy right here? Okay, so we have,
Yeah.
I'd say this is the focus. when we think about the focus of a painting, we have to think about how does a painter create that focus? Our eyes start here. I'm getting a lot of feedback here. Sorry, guys. Our eyes start here on this guy. And notice we have, what is his job?
He's plowing a field.
Okay, he's plowing a field. Okay, so we have got a farmer. And what are some interesting things to note is this guy is obviously someone we're supposed to be spending our time looking at. And where is this guy looking? He's looking straight down, right? That's where his eyes go to. And so, of course, because he's looking there, that's our immediate thing. We look at him and immediately he's looking down, and that sends our eyes down. So that tells us that he is focused on the earth, right? He's focused on his job. He's focused on his work. He's not really focused on all this other stuff that's going on around him. And that leads, notice we get these cool lines. And this whole set of lines sort of drags us down. We see the horse also working with this guy. And then the lines continue over here, which generally puts us into this super bright spot. So our eyes are going to go here. And what do we notice is over here?
It appears to be a pasture with sheep or goats.
Okay, we've got a pastor. He's got sheep, goats, whatever. He's got his trusty dog, right? So this is a guy who is a shepherd of some sort. And whenever we have a shepherd, and notice where his eyes are going. Where are his eyes? Where's he facing?
They're going up.
Yeah, he's facing straight up into the sky. So again, that's going to kind of make our eyes go up here to this bright spot, and we're going to notice all of this other landscape over here. Now, whenever we see a shepherd in anything that is, and Peter Bruegel, by the way, is, Peter Bruegel is he's from the Netherlands, I believe. Okay, so he is a European guy. I believe this was done in the 1400s. He's noted, so we have to notice that any person in this old of a painting in Europe, and we have a shepherd, he's probably representing something. He's very symbolic. So we've got our worker is our main focus here, right? Our peasant worker is our main focus. And then we come down to this shepherd. And of course, shepherds always represent, in this culture, in this time period, that's always going to represent probably something along the lines of being like a Christian symbolism, you know, something godlike, something along those lines. But that brings us back here, and then we start looking at all of this stuff. So where do you think they are working? What is the setting here? I mean, we got these guys working and doing their thing way over here, and they're outside of this whole area. What is this whole area? Any thoughts, any ideas? Nobody? This, huh?
The ocean.
Yeah, we definitely have, this is obviously a port, right? And a port city for the ocean. We can see that we've got ships coming in. We also have this is kind of an odd little thing, but we can probably make guesses. When you have a fortified structure on an island outside of a city, what do you think might be in there? This is actually a prison.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is a prison. So, so that's kind of an interesting piece that we added that, but that's fairly normal in Greece, which means we're not in the Netherlands, right? And I also know this because of the name of this whole piece. It's called Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. And then once I've gone over here, then I kind of come over here and I can see that we've got another boat coming in, and I see 2 more folks. Okay, so who are my, this is being difficult. Who are my 2 folks over here?
It appears one person is swimming, and it looks like the other one is shouting to him or maybe trying to call him.
Actually, this is a fisherman over here. Yeah, I mean, it's hard in this piece because it's a little bit dark. You know what I mean? But this is a fisherman, and he's looking straight down, so he's not really noticing this. So, is there anything that seems weird or odd or different about this piece to anybody?
The proportion of the man to the ship that looks like it's only a little bit away from him. Like, it makes the ship look really small with the guy swimming right there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's an interesting proportion that he's got going on. And notice how dark this corner has been made too, compared to everything else. Did anybody notice that?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
This is really dark. It's really shaded. It's really intended for us to barely even notice. I want at this point for us to look and say, what is the title of the painting? What they call this? Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. Anybody want to help me out on that? Does anybody know anything about that? I see a landscape. Anybody see the Fall of Icarus?
Probably the bottom right.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. So this is probably our Fall of Icarus, because this is the only thing that kind of looks that way. But what, anybody know who Icarus is?
Isn't he a god of sorts?
Yeah, you're on the right track.
I'm sorry, like, it sounds so familiar because I've read a comic where they keep mentioning Icarus, but they never explain who he is.
Yeah.
He was the guy that got locked in prison with his dad, and then they made wings out of bird feathers, and then they flew out of prison.
Okay, he flew out of prison to try to get someone to help his dad out. And do you remember how they made the wings?
Bird feathers and wax.
Yeah, and then what happened to him?
He
Flew
flew too close to the sun.
Correct. He flew too close to the sun, and because he decided to fly too close to the sun, the wax melted, and he fell from the sky to his death. Right? This is a classic Greek mythology piece, right? So I guess what we have to ask then is, why would we have made a landscape like this where we focus on a farmer looking down at the ground? We come over here, we get this solid Christian, it's smaller, it's not as big of a deal, but it's a smaller, but obviously Christian kind of symbol, right? A shepherd in the sunlight, looking up to the heavens, just in case you missed that. And then we get a port city, and this is what we want to look at, and we almost miss this whole Icarus guy down here. And even the guy here isn't looking at him. He's worried about his net that he's got going down here. What is Peter Bruegel trying to say? Any thoughts?
Possibly, like, ignorance on the mythology, like, maybe nobody believes it, possibly he could be saying, or
I think you're, sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, or like, everybody just forgot about or forgot about the story and just, you know, doesn't realize what it really is, and like, I don't know.
Well, and this is when we have to ask the next question, which is, who is the artist? And it's Peter Bruegel. And Bruegel is an interesting guy. If you get, like, the more that you get to know anything about Bruegel, the more that you're going to realize how interesting of an artist he was. He was, and I had a video that was attached, but I don't know if it's going to play, that's on Bruegel, because Zoom doesn't really like to play YouTube videos while you're on it. So I'll just give you kind of some background on it, and I'll probably attach it later on to Schoology so you can watch it if you want to. But Bruegel was in the 1400s in the Netherlands. And so we're in a time period where people are kind of moving from these ideas. And by the way, this is supposed to be the prison that they had escaped from. So this is supposed to be Minos, I think. But so we're in a time frame where people are moving away from those ideas, and Christianity is definitely moving in. So that is certainly part of what he's commenting on here. But the other thing that Bruegel did that was really revolutionary for his time, and actually got him in quite a bit of trouble, was that he did not focus on royalty. Up until this point, the only people that we really painted or took pictures of or cared about or thought of as humans and thought of as individuals, right, were royalty and gods. That was it. Other people were not important enough. In fact, when they thought about things, when kings and stuff thought about peasantry and things like that, they weren't even considered human. It was not a bad thing if you killed a peasant, right? And Bruegel really pushes what's okay with people by putting the focus on a common worker, a guy working a field. That's who the focus of the painting is. And we put this little god as just a couple of legs sticking out of the water, right? And so we do have people who are focused on their work primarily. And then we also get over here where we get, and what are they looking to? They are looking up to this God that is starting to take over, and that is starting to, you know, that theology is starting to take over, instead of people believing in the gods and goddesses like they had prior to that. So that's something that's kind of interesting about Bruegel, is that he looks at those. Oh, sorry, it was 1558. I was off by 100 years. But it was painted in the Netherlands in 1558, so that would be important to look at. Not necessarily that you're going to look at this necessarily exactly what was happening in 1558, but to get a general idea of what was happening. And that's going to be important. Here's a story of in Crete, and this is that son, that the story of Icarus, which I think you guys all kind of remembered once we looked at it. So you kind of have to know who Icarus was in order to understand what we were getting at, right, when we looked at this. And so then we move on. This was what I was hoping would play. I'm not sure if it'll play for us or not. It would be super cool if it would, but I don't know if it will. Maybe it will. Maybe. Can you guys see that? Can you guys see that?
No.
No?
No, I don't see anything.
Yeah, I kind of thought that might be happening. So we are going to just go back to here. And that's just the video that I wanted you to see that was about Bruegel. But obviously, if you're not seeing it, we'll just move on. He has, and that really just goes more into his lifetime and who he was. This is another Bruegel painting. You can notice, again, he's focused on the workers in a field. And so he has a lot of really interesting work. So I would look into that. So when we're analyzing a painting, you have to think first, what is the focus of the painting? Where is it that your eye goes to, and why does your eye go there? And a lot of times you'll either see things sort of circle around something, or you'll see that there's all the light is put on one spot, or you'll see everybody's looking at something. All of those things will help you understand where the focus of the painting really is. And so you always want to try to find that focus. There's a few paintings out there that purposely don't have a focus. Like there's usually what we would do next here is we would all go and find one of those paintings that are in the hallway at school. You know what I mean? And everybody would get one, and we would all kind of analyze our painting and share it with everybody. But being that we're not at school, we can't really do that. And there's one that's all about New York City, and it shows pictures, and there's no focus on it because it was the rise of the city, you know, and it was the first time people were like, we just have too much to look at and you can't focus on anything. And people were just getting, you know, overwhelmed by the amount of stimulus of a city. So it's a really interesting piece. But you have to look at what is the focus of the painting, and then consider why is it there. So what did we say was the focus of the painting that we just looked at? What was our focus in Landscape with the Fall of Icarus?
The peasants and the workers. And
okay, the peasant first, and then the shepherd, right? So that was our focus. People and characters in the painting, and whether or not those have significance. And this is where you really need to know kind of your archetypes, you know. When we see a peasant working in a field, what does he represent? You know, he represents not just that one guy, but he represents that whole class of people. That can be different, though. It can be, if it's a very specific thing where they show clearly it's, you know, the President of the United States or something like that, then obviously you're supposed to think about it as that particular person. But if it's something kind of where it's a generalized thing, usually it's supposed to represent an entire class of people. And you have to think about what is the significance, what are they saying about those? Then you have to think overall, what is the mood of the painting? So when we think about that one, what was the mood? What are some words we could use to describe the mood of that painting? I can go back to it really quickly. What would we say was the mood of this painting? It's not The Scream by Edvard Munch, right?
It's kind of peaceful.
Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting thought, that we have just sort of a peaceful, pastoral, getting on, not really anything exciting going on. And at the same time as we have this feeling, like that's what you get out of this painting. We're in this kind of peaceful, beautiful setting and doing work and, you know, praying a little, whatever, doing our daily thing. And they're doing that at the same time as a god is dying right in front of them. And this guy doesn't even look up to notice. These guys don't look. Nobody's running and helping that guy. He's just dying. And so I think it's interesting that we have sort of a peaceful, serene situation, and then we have a god dying in the corner. So that's something to really kind of pay attention to. You know, why would we make those choices? And so that's something, when we think about the mood, what is the mood of it? Come up with some words that you think describe it. Support that with what's going on in the painting, with what the picture is, and then say, well, you know, then question it. Does that mood work, or is there something ironic about that mood? Because I would say that's a pretty ironic mood when you have somebody dying in the corner. You know, usually if you have a god dying, everybody's paying attention to that. So that's interesting. Color choices. Overall, what were the colors of the painting? How would you describe this?
And looks like they mainly consist of like blues and yellows for the most part, just kind of contrasting colors.
Yeah, we have these very natural looking blues and yellows. And notice once again, our only red really is this, which also helps to bring that focus here. You know what I mean? Because that's the only place we see this sort of bright color. Everything else are these sort of subdued hues. I guess we have a little bit of red on his hat right here too. But do you see how the artist has done that to help focus you in? So that's another thing. So why would he have chosen to use that color palette? And again, you think of those blues and those sort of yellowy colors, but it's not like bright yellow or anything like that. It's not McDonald's yellow. You know, we're talking sort of that creamy off whitish kind of yellow. Again, those are calming colors. Those are colors we paint our houses because it makes us feel calm and serene, you know. And again, that's an interesting color choice in the time frame. Is there anything that's symbolic? So what are some symbols that we found?
You said earlier the shepherd could be something that was symbolic.
Yep. Shepherd is definitely one. Anything else? Sorry.
The one dark corner, like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here's a great God dying. I think he's symbolic of something. What is he symbolic of? There's our question. And nobody cares about him dying, but that means this is a symbol of something. If we said that our worker is representative of all shepherds, or of all workers and all peasants in this time frame, and our shepherd is representative of workers and people who believe in this other God. And notice where he is. His back is turned. Do you see that? His back is turned and completely, I guess I could, right? Because we have his back is here, and here's the guy over here, right? So he's not even looking at this guy. So he represents sort of this new ideology, this new something that's coming in. Then what does this guy represent? So we said that's Icarus. Any thoughts?
Maybe that shows like that the Greek gods are like dying out and people are moving towards Christianity.
I believe you're on the right track there. Yeah, this guy is representative of that entire class. We're using this fall of Icarus because it's very convenient, right? To have, because in the story he dies because he falls out of the sky. But it's interesting that nobody is looking at him. Nobody cares. Even this guy, this is the only guy who could save him, this little fisherman down here. And even he's not interested. So that's something for us to be kind of noticing as we go through all of this. I'm gonna take my little laser pointer off or I can't go through. So also anything that seems odd, whenever you see something and it seems really weird, like I would say it's really odd that we took this thing that we named it the Fall of Icarus. That's the second half of it, Landscape of the Fall of Icarus. And yet you could easily walk by this painting and not even notice the Fall of Icarus. Right? If I'm in an art museum, it's very likely I wouldn't even notice that piece or that bit. And then, of course, we want to reconsider the title and think about how is it relevant to the painting. And if you haven't figured it out yet, like if I looked at that, like I said, in an art museum and it said Landscape with the Fall of Icarus, I'd be like, wait a minute, where's the Fall of Icarus? So you need to reconsider that title and how is it important. So if I were taking this piece and I wanted to explain to you what Peter Bruegel, I can't say it the right way, but if I wanted to say what he was trying to get across, what would I say was his point? What idea was he trying to get across to his audience, to the people looking at this painting? Because that's step one in analysis, right? What was the point? Because this guy got in trouble for this type of stuff, like serious trouble for this type of stuff. Thoughts? What message?
Maybe,
Sorry, go ahead.
maybe that like the world is moving on from like Greek gods and royals and they're moving towards like one God in Christianity.
Okay, they're definitely moving towards one God in Christianity. And we're also saying that, and what the people believe, the common people, are important. And the common people are rejecting this idea. If I want to prove that that's what he did, I have to decide if I thought it was effective or if it wasn't. But if I decide I wanted to write down that's what he was trying to get across in this painting, what do I need to tell someone in that analysis? What do I need? Like, what do I have to sort of gather? What information do I have to gather in order for this essay to happen? Because I bet most of you, when you looked at this, didn't quite get it. Am I correct?
You'd probably have to like explain the story of like Icarus.
Okay, I definitely need to explain the story of Icarus. What else do I need to know?
The time, like what year it was made and the kind of where it was made, when it was made, the whole background knowledge of that.
And I also need to know what's happening as far as the fact that Christianity was definitely moving in to the Netherlands at this point, right? I need to know that. So when I start to think about all of that, when I break down, I say that this is what he was trying to say. I give some background on what the painting actually looks like and what the focus is of the painting. I talk about the time period. I talk about the colors and the symbols and all of that. Do you think we can get 4 pages out of this?
I'd say it's possible.
I'd say it's definitely possible. Now, you have to really think about all of those things. And when we're dealing with this, This is one of those essays where all of a sudden you're going to realize how much you have to really explain. Because you're not going to have where you can just steal tons of quotes from people and just let the quotes do the work for you. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that. And that's okay, because good writing doesn't do a whole lot of that anyhow. But what you are going to be thinking about is, you know, what is this symbol? And you're going to do it by saying things like, we have a, you know, you have to explain to me, why do you believe the focus of the painting is the guy, you know, is the peasant who's, you know, our peasant who's doing the tilling here. And you're going to be looking at all of those different things and kind of breaking each of those things down as to why it's important. Does this make sense to everybody? I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I am going to, you know, we have our focus, our highlight, our shepherd, who's also in the light. We had the prison in Crete. We had symbols that were throughout. We had a mood that was created. We had colors that we can talk about. And then we have our odd thing, which is Icarus, who is dark and insignificant and nobody's paying attention to. And of course, that's important to the painting, to the title of the painting. So this is another piece by Bruegel. I think this is interesting, actually. And you can see, again, we've got, who's the focus of this? Is this a bunch of, we've got some kind of an army over here, right? This is actually, I thought this, the reason I put this up here was because I think it was the most inappropriate Christmas card I've ever seen in my entire life. Because this was a Christmas card that I got one time. And it's actually about the slaughter of innocents when King Herod went running around killing all of the children right after he found out that Jesus was born. Which is why I thought it was an incredibly inappropriate Christmas card, but we won't talk too much about that. But in order to understand something, that's also by Peter Bruegel. You have to know the artwork, you have to find information on the artist, information on the time period, information on the artistic movement and what was going on in that time, information on the way the artist produced the piece, and of course what made it stand out. So those are some of the big things. And what I want you to do, and you can write this down, and this should be italicized, by the way, the name of a painting or sculpture or anything like that is supposed to be italicized. So that's my fault. That should be italicized. The names of photographs are in quotation marks. So when you eventually choose your piece, that's it. But what I want you to do is on Monday, I'm going to have a little video for you guys to watch. And it's a virtual art museum field trip that I'm going to have up on Schoology. And then I also want you to take a peek at this one, and we can kind of look at it for just a moment. What are some of the things that you guys notice on this one? Because I want you to just kind of say some of those basics. What are some of the things you notice? What do you think is the focus? You know, that sort of thing. So what do you notice about this particular piece right now?
It has a lot of contrasting colors, like the blue against the white is very different, and it's like very clear. And
Yeah, we
then the white against the yellow you can clearly see, and then
yeah. I will give you a hint. This was a block print. It's one of the most famous block prints ever done. And it was by it's a Japanese artist. So that means that they did a separate block with each one of these colors and then like almost like put a stamp on each one. And then they made thousands of these. You know, so like this color is one stamp and this color is another stamp and this one's another stamp and this one's another stamp. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So notice, how does this wave look? Like, why do you think the edges, like, that's not what a wave really looks like on the edges. Why do you think it looks that way?
It's probably because it's
It
so
kind of
big.
looks like more thread.
Okay, I heard a couple of things, one at a time. I mean, it kind of makes it, gives it that kind of angry look, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks like claws.
Yeah, definitely. However, again, we're going to do the close your eyes for a second and open them. Where do your eyes immediately go?
To the big wave,
Does it?
at least for me.
I definitely noticed this wave. This is really important. And how do you feel?
Mine kind of go to the boats.
Yeah, we've got these boats. Tell me about what situation are these boats in? Would you want to be them?
No.
It's like a life or death situation.
Yeah, we've definitely got these guys in this life or death situation. And yet all of this is sort of circling around. Do you see this? This like, because we've got the wave coming up here and then here, and it kind of circles around. And what's it all circling around? There's one stable thing in this entire print. Do you see this? This is Mount Fuji in the back. Right? So Mount Fuji, if you know much about Japanese beliefs and Japanese religion, they really believe they're very much into nature and things being really stable, and that nature is the thing you can depend on, right? And so I think it's really interesting that we have all this turmoil going out here, but then they put this very stable mountain. Yet, of course, we know Mount Fuji is a volcano, but it's also the volcano that sort of creates them. So we have this stable mountain in the back, and I think that's a really interesting thought. So just something for you to think about, and I will put a quick little blip up about that one. But right now, of course, today, what is your homework, of course, is to complete those final drafts of your speech analysis, right? So you have your final draft is going to be due tomorrow, right? Or do I have that up as Monday at like 9 a.m.? I can't remember. I might put it up. Would it be helpful to you guys to have till 9 a.m. on Monday?
I'd be okay with that.
Okay, I'll do that. And then on Monday, Monday, I'm gonna want you to go on a quick little virtual field trip, and I'm just gonna ask for your thoughts on that. And I think we kind of talked about this wave, so I'm not gonna worry about the wave off Kanagawa all that much, okay? Any questions, concerns? Was that helpful to everybody, I hope?
Very much so.
Okay. So I do have one last question, and it's basically that I know that we have several other things to go through on this particular one, and I can do the like videos, you know how I can talk into a PowerPoint or whatever and put them up. I could do something like that. Do you think it would be more helpful for us to do a couple more Zooms in place of that? Or would you rather do it that I just gave you the video for you to watch? Because we have to talk about sculptures and we have to talk about photography. What are your thoughts?
Do Zoom.
You'd rather Zoom? Okay, well then keep your eyes open. And what I think I will do, I can't do 1 o'clock as always. I I can't always do 1 o'clock Zooms because I do a 1 o'clock Zoom with different classes on different days, but I could probably pull off doing it like a couple more days in the week, and we could do it at just at a different time. We could maybe do like 2 o'clock or something. Would that work? Would people be okay with 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I am going to say goodbye for now. And then I will just give you guys a heads up of exactly when we'll have the next Zooms, and I'll get that out to you as soon as I can, okay? So enjoy, have fun, do your essays, and then we will talk more art when we all get back. Bye.
Bye-bye.